The war for the South China Sea ended in 2017. Nobody told you because the side that lost is still showing up to fight. 3 artificial islands, 3-kilometer runways, hardened missile shelters, built, armed, finished 9 years ago. Every water cannon clash you have watched since happened around fortresses that were already complete. The footage looks like a battle. It is enforcement. Around installations the fight failed to stop. So what is actually still being contested? A document, and the document might be worse than the islands. The physical contest is over. China holds the grid. The live battle is over text. The Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative at CSIS, the outfit that tracked every dredger by satellite, called major construction on the 3 big reefs, largely complete in March 2017. From that month forward, nothing anyone did on the water changed the map. Not a tribunal, not 1,000 patrols, not a single ramming at 2nd Thomas Shoal. What can still change is a code of conduct now being negotiated to a deadline of this year, clause by clause, mostly unread. Its text will decide whether the rest of the region signs a document that makes the finished grid politically untouchable. The drama you watch is noise. The PDF you ignore is the decision. Name the 3: Fiery Cross Reef, Subi Reef, Mischief Reef. Between 2013 and 2016, Chinese dredgers turned them from tidal rock into the largest artificial military bases on Earth. By March 2017, AMTI reported the naval, air, radar, and defensive facilities it had tracked for 2 years were largely complete, and that Beijing could deploy combat aircraft and mobile missile launchers to the Spratlys at any time. Each reef carries a runway near 3 kilometers, long enough for every combat aircraft China flies. Hangars for 24 fighters per base, plus larger frames for bombers, transports, and surveillance planes. Hardened shelters with retractable roofs for missile launchers. Radar and sensor arrays covering nearly the whole sea. In 2022, the commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Admiral John Aquilino, used one phrase for all 3: fully militarized. Here is what should bother you about the clashes since. Manila already won this sea in court 10 years ago. So why are you watching Filipino sailors get water cannoned around a reef a tribunal says is theirs? Hold that question. First, kill the frame you are using. You watch a Coast Guard cutter blast a resupply boat, and you score it as a battle in an ongoing war. There is no ongoing war over the islands. The construction phase ended, the operational phase began, and every incident since is a finished base policing its perimeter. A water cannon at 2nd Thomas Shoal is not China fighting for position. It is China using position it already holds, with response times measured in hours from the Spratly bases, while Philippine vessels steam the better part of a day from Palawan. The cameras feed the error. A ship-on-ship collision produces footage. A construction completion report produces a satellite photo nobody shares, so the visible layer shows struggle, while the structural layer shows a finished project 9 years into operations. Retire the idea that the incidents you watch are contests over the sea. They are patrols around the outcome. That court victory. July 12, 2016. The Permanent Court of Arbitration Tribunal at The Hague ruled the 9-dash line has no legal basis under UNCLOS. It went further on specifics. Mischief Reef, it found, is a low-tide elevation inside the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone, not disputed territory. Philippine seabed, occupied by a foreign military base. Beijing's response had 2 parts. The Foreign Ministry declared the award null and void with no binding force, language it has repeated ever since, and the dredgers kept working. The militarization AMTI documented through 2016 and 2017, the missile shelters, the hangars, the radar domes, was completed after the ruling that declared the underlying occupation unlawful. Track every feature since. The count of Chinese installations removed, reduced, or demilitarized in response to legal or diplomatic pressure is 0. Not one structure, not one radar, not 1 meter of runway. The belief that needs burying is legal optimism, the assumption that a win in court compounds over time into a win on the water. The award did move one thing: language. It gave Manila and its partners a legal anchor for statements. It moved no concrete. A ruling without an enforcement mechanism is a press release with footnotes. notes, and Mischief Reef has been operating on Philippine seabed for a decade, since a tribunal said exactly that. This is the fact that makes the next one matter. If law could not move the islands, the only instrument left that touches them is whatever document the region signs about them next. Let go of the comfort that time and law are quietly working in Manila's favor. They have had 10 years. The bases got stronger. Stop watching the ships. The thing that decides this sea is a document most people will never read. ASEAN and China are negotiating a code of conduct for the South China Sea. In July 2023, the two sides adopted guidelines instructing that the code be finished within 3 years, which lands the deadline in 2026. The Philippines chairs ASEAN this year and has made completion its flagship deliverable. Foreign Secretary Teresa Lazaro told a Washington audience this month the code is targeted for the end of the year, with negotiating rounds now running monthly. And in January, China's new ambassador in Manila, Jing Quan, publicly urged swift completion of the very code Beijing slow-walked for 2 decades. That last detail should stop you. The side with the islands suddenly wants the rulebook finished. Sides do not lobby for documents that constrain them. The code's value lives in 3 unresolved questions. First, geographic scope. Does the code cover the waters the 2016 award addressed, or does drafting ambiguity let the 9-dash line live inside the text? Second, legal bindingness. Lazaro says Manila wants it legally binding. A non-binding code is the 2002 declaration with a new cover page. Third, and sharpest, third parties. According to reported draft positions tracked by AMTI, China has pushed language restricting joint military exercises and joint energy development with countries outside the region unless all parties consent. Read that clause operationally. Manila's drills with the United States, Japan, and Australia would require Beijing's sign-off. A Philippine energy contract with a Western major at Reed Bank would require Beijing's sign-off. The clause does not mention the islands. It does not need to. It converts China's physical position into a veto over everyone else's partnerships while conceding nothing built. A signed code reads as de-escalation. The text decides whether it is de-escalation or ratification. A weak code does not freeze the status quo. It blesses it, placing the burden of restraint on every party except the one with runways. The assumption to abandon is that code of conduct concluded is automatically a headline to celebrate. Whether it is a shield or a surrender instrument depends on clauses almost nobody will read. A signed agreement with self-restraint language stabilizes behavior. The region tested that proposition once, at full scale, with a control group of one ocean. In November 2002, ASEAN and China signed the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea. It called on signatories to exercise self-restraint and to refrain from inhabiting uninhabited features. It was non-binding. It contained no enforcement mechanism, no monitoring body, no penalty clause. Then look at the construction dates. Every major Chinese artificial island in the Spratlys was built after that signature. The dredging surge ran 2013 to 2016, 11 years into the declaration's life. The number of enforcement actions taken under the DOC across its entire existence is 0 because the document contains nothing to enforce with. The declaration did not merely fail to stop the building. It furnished the diplomatic weather the building needed. Through the peak dredging years, the standing answer to alarmed neighbors was process. Talks were ongoing. A code was coming. Stability was being managed. A MTI noted the pattern as early as 2017. Attention stayed on negotiations over basic principles while the facilities went in. Unenforceable paper does not restrain power. It schedules the press conferences that cover for it. That is the precedent sitting under the current negotiation, and it is why the bindingness clause in Section 3 is not a technicality. It is the entire difference between this code and the last one. What dies here is the instinct that a signature, any signature, lowers the temperature. The region has already signed one of these. The islands rose under it. If this is the kind of analysis you want more of, subscribing is how you keep getting it. Almost everyone is drilling inside China's line. That sounds like defiance. Look closer, and it is the opposite of symmetry. Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines all conduct hydrocarbon activity inside the 9-dash line. The clearest case is Malaysian. Petronas, the state energy company, operates Block SK316 off Sarawak, home of the Kasawari gas project, one of Malaysia's largest, sitting inside Malaysia's EEZ and inside China's claim line. China Coast Guard vessels have patrolled the nearby nearby Luconia shoals since around 2013, and AMTI has documented them passing within 1,000 meters of producing platforms. In 2024, a leaked Chinese diplomatic note demanded Kuala Lumpur halt the work. Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim refused publicly, saying Malaysia would keep drilling in its own waters. Malaysia's Marine Department logged 23 exploratory wells in 2024, the most since 2015, with 15 more by late the following year. The gas flows, the patrols circle, neither stops. So the disputed waters framing tells you all 5 claimants are in the same legal mess together. The map of hardware says otherwise. 4 claimants drill under surveillance. 1 claimant owns the surveillance. Vietnam holds dozens of small outposts, the Philippines a handful, Malaysia a few. None has a 3-kilometer runway. None shelters a fighter regiment. The asymmetry is not who is present in the sea. It is who can put combat aircraft over any point of it within the hour against navies steaming from Palawan or Luzon. That asymmetry also explains why the harassment never escalates to a shooting stop. Beijing does not need to stop the rigs. Permanent presence around them does the strategic work, normalizing Chinese patrol of other countries' EEZs as the background condition of doing business, while the third-party clause from Section 3 waits to do the rest on paper. The frame to discard is the symmetric dispute. 5 flags squabbling over the same rocks. 4 countries operate inside the line at China's tolerance. China operates from inside the line at no one's. The country chairing these talks is also the one whose lights go out first. Beijing knows that. Holding the ASEAN gavel in 2026 looks like leverage for Manila. Set the agenda, schedule the rounds, steer the drafting. The gavel comes with a clock attached. Malampaya, the gas field that has powered a large share of Luzon for 2 decades, is depleting. The replacement sits at Reed Bank, inside the Philippine EEZ, with reserves. Philippine officials, citing assessments, have put it up to 5.4 billion barrels of oil equivalent. Former Supreme Court Justice Antonio Carpio warned back in 2017 that without developing it, Luzon faced the prospect of 10 to 12-hour daily brownouts within a decade. And Reed Bank cannot be developed at scale, while Chinese vessels treat the area as patrol ground, and no major will ensure a rig there. That pressure has already bent the presidency once this year. In March, with fuel prices spiking from the Iran war, President Marcos told Bloomberg he was open to joint exploration with China. Within 3 weeks, the Department of Foreign Affairs fenced the opening, restating that any deal happens solely under the Philippine Constitution and the country's sovereign rights in its EEZ. The episode lasted 21 days, and it told Beijing precisely what it wanted confirmed. The chair across the table has an energy deadline its own legal system will not let it solve bilaterally. So invert the picture of the negotiation. The procedural power sits with Manila. The temporal power sits with Beijing, which loses nothing by letting rounds run while Malampaya drains. The most exposed claimant holds the gavel, which is exactly the arrangement a patient counterparty would design. Bury the assumption that chairing the talks puts Manila in command of them. The chair is negotiating against its own electricity bill. One exit looks safe. If the draft is poison, refuse it. ASEAN runs on consensus, so any member can withhold agreement, and the status quo holds. The status quo is not holding. It is compounding. Every year of normal operations embeds the bases deeper into regional routine. Airlines route around their airspace. Fishermen adjust to their patrols. Officials meet their garrison's Coast Guard escorts as facts of geography. Each joint statement and guideline that manages tensions without naming the 2016 award washes a little more legitimacy over the position. Occupation accrues standing the way. Interest accrues on a loan, whether or not anyone signs anything. The region has now spent 24 years inside this process, from the 2002 declaration through the 2017 framework to this year's deadline, and across those 24 years, China's physical position only improved. That is the closed loop. A weak code legitimizes the grid quickly, by signature. No code legitimizes it slowly, by routine. The single outcome that genuinely constrains Beijing is a binding code anchored to UNCLOS and the Arbitral award, and that is the precise text China has resisted since negotiations began. Its January enthusiasm for finishing the code is enthusiasm for finishing a particular version of it. So the choice in front of the region's negotiators is not deal or no deal, it is the speed of normalization, fast by ink or slow by calendar, unless the text itself changes character. Watch for one word in whatever emerges this year: binding. If it is absent or qualified into mush, the document document is the 2002 declaration wearing a heavier cover, and the island's final upgrade will have arrived not by dredger, but by signature page. The last belief to surrender is the one that feels most prudent, that refusing to sign keeps the question open. The question is not open. It is closing at one of two speeds. The South China Sea was not lost in a battle anyone filmed. It was won in concrete by 2017, and the only thing still being decided is the paperwork that makes it permanent. You made it to the end, which means you think the way this channel thinks. Subscribe, and the next one finds you.